Good morning, Northpoint. All right, you're awake. Hey, Blake. Thank you. I feel so welcomed by the student section every week. You know, last month I was with you and I shared that we had just moved our two sons into college, right? I moved one into Texas Tech, one in UT, which is really not very far, right? He's already come home a few times. But, I just wanted to kind of give you an update because honestly, when they left, I cried for 2 days straight, like non-stop crying in my eye. Like when I wasn't actually bawling, my husband makes fun of me. He goes, you just sat around for 2 days and you're like, I'm not sad. I'm so not sad. I'm so happy for them. But like, I just cried. But it's been a month now. And I just, do we have any other empty nesters in the room? No empty nesters? Almost. Okay. Well, I know we had some in first service. I'm sure we have a few online. Of course we have a few online because you don't got to come here anymore. You don't have to worry about taking them to their classes. You're probably watching your pajamas. Well, I just need to be honest. Like, I have a little bit of tension with the empty nesters because I just feel like when we are in different life seasons, we should give each other a heads up about what it might be like. And no empty nesters, like, really adequately warned me or prepared me for how amazing this is. Guys, this is so great. I mean, your parents love you. But and I love my boys, but this is so awesome. Let me just kind of let you know in case apparently most of you aren't there yet. I just want to give you a heads up. One, I can grind my coffee in the morning whenever I want. No one complains about it being too loud or it wakes anybody up. Also, I'm already saving a ton of money on groceries. We had 2 boys. And one of my favorite things is so whatever condition the house is in when I leave for work, it's the same condition when I get back. Like dishes are out of the sink and in the dishwasher, and I come home and they're still out of the sink and in the dishwasher, and there aren't 20 pairs of shoes in the foyer anymore. But I'm going to be real with you and just get a little vulnerable because this is probably my favorite part of empty nesting. There's no more of this. So let's unpack something for you. For years, my husband Sal and I have wondered the mystery of how there are fingerprints and smudge marks on a refrigerator that has handles. We actually had workshops as a family on how to appropriately use the refrigerator, and these things appeared every single day. But now that they are gone, it was them all along. And now I know what caused the smudges and you can come over to my house anytime. No more smudges or fingerprints on the stainless steel refrigerator. Now, I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, or you weren't here last month. You have no clue all this stuff I'm talking about. My name is Jennifer Mazzola. I'm a volunteer here at Northpoint, part of the teaching team, a volunteer at Inside Out. My husband, Sal, and our 2 boys, Kyle and Parker, consider Northpoint our church family. And, another thing just to know about me is I'm an only child. Any other only children here? Hello. Thank you. Hey, I do know you. Yeah, we have a club. And, just so you know, being an only child is an actual thing. It's actually a thing you have to process and work through. Because you're kind of the baby, but also the firstborn at the same time. So you're kind of bossy and whiny at the exact same time. You don't really have to interact with people a ton, right? You might, you're interacting with adults, so your language is really weird when you go to be around your peers. But, you don't have to deal with conflict. Me figuring out how to deal with conflict and difficult conversations was a new thing because my imaginary friends thought I was awesome. And so I had zero issue. And if I didn't like something happened in the neighborhood and I was playing with neighborhood kids, I went home and they weren't there. So I never had to deal with sibling rivalry or dealing with sibling dynamics, which meant it was really cool when I married a man from New York who's Italian and one of 4. It was really great. I learned a ton. So when Jeremy was like, hey, I want you to teach on this passage where Jesus is using a parable about siblings, I was like, okay, cool. I know nothing about that. Let's jump in. That'll be great. We're wrapping up our series called Heart to Heart, where we're having an honest conversation about the heart of God. And the reason we're doing this is because if we miss what is actually the heart of God, we actually could miss the heart of the Christian faith, like the reason that we're here, that we opened these doors this morning. And we want to make sure that we have a heart to heart together to see what God might actually say to us. Now, when you have a heart-to-heart with anybody, right, with your kids, a friend, a spouse, or whatever, you're kind of doing one of 3 things, right? You're trying to communicate your intention. Here's what I'm trying to say to you. I want to sit down, have a serious conversation, and I want you to hear what I'm really intending to say. Or maybe you have to sit down and have a heart-to-heart because you have to clarify misunderstandings. Hey, that's not what I meant, so I just want to clarify that for a second. You heard it this way, but this is really what I meant. Or maybe you're actually stepping into a heart-to-heart to challenge wrong thinking. Like, I know you felt this way about this, or this might be what you heard, but here is what I actually meant. And this is what Jesus is doing in these parables. Parables are just stories with an intended meaning. And this whole series of parables are about the heart of God. Now, Jordan shared 2 weeks ago, Jeremy shared last week, and they shared from Luke 15. That's kind of where we've been sitting for the last 3 weeks. Now, Jordan shared right before the parable of the lost son, we have the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin, right? And all three of these stories are about people, animal, thing that is lost, and we find them, and then we celebrate them lavishly when they are returned. The son comes home. The sheep is found and brought home. The coin is found. Now, if you didn't get a chance to watch last week or the week before, I really want to encourage you to. I know we kind of say that every Sunday, but to be honest, like really, you can't understand today without understanding how Jesus is actually building a narrative. With every single story, we start with the coin and then the sheep and then the son. Every time he's getting a little bolder with his message. He's getting a little more direct. He's actually broadening his audience and getting a little sassier with what he's actually saying. And that's what we want to do, because the crowd in the moment, the audience listening to Jesus at the time, those that were lost would have been leaning in. Wait a minute. I think he's talking about me. Like, I feel like I'm unworthy. I feel like I don't belong here. I feel like there's not a space for me here. And I think Jesus is saying, maybe I'm the coin. Maybe I'm the sheep. And maybe I'm the son. But then also, Jesus is a masterful storyteller. Almost every moment he has to communicate, he's talking to multiple audiences. So it's not just for the lost people listening. Jesus tells this story for the people that feel found already, especially for the people that felt the most found, like that checked all the boxes and did all the right things. And the reality is, for some of us this morning, that's us. And if we miss the heart of God in this moment, some of us will miss the message that's for us. And all of us, if we miss the main point of all of these parables coming together, we'll miss the message for all of us. We can't discover the heart of God without taking a look at the full illustration that Jesus gives us in this moment. Now, I want to recap, because again, these kind of parables string together. Jesus is building some tension. And I want to recap what Jeremy shared last week from Act 1 of the parable of the lost son, or the parable of the prodigal. So we have this younger brother. Jesus is telling this story. He's like, I've got this younger son who comes to the father and asks for his inheritance early, which Jeremy unpacked like that would have been extremely insulting culturally and just personally to the father. But the father says yes and gives him everything early. He takes all of that. He goes to a distant land and he squanders it all with what some translations call wild living. And I'll let you fill in the blank with what wild living looks like for you. So he comes and he says, I'm going to spend all the money. Everything is gone. And then a famine hits and he finds himself in crisis. He has nothing. He has nothing left but shame. And he finds himself feeding pigs. He's asked to be a hired hand. And he's looking at the food the pigs get to eat. And he's like, I would even just long for that. And then he has a moment when he comes to his senses and he says, wait a minute, what if I just go home? And his brother feels not just lost, but Jeremy used the phrase last week that I loved, irretrievably lost. And the audience would have understood, oh yeah, no, he's too far gone. Yeah, no, he messed up too much. He's definitely not a good son anymore. And then Jesus tells this story of how this brother is rehearsing this speech, this apology, all the things he did wrong, and he's walking up the driveway, and the father runs to meet him and lavishly celebrates his return. He throws a party. And for most audiences, right, like that's where it like should wrap up. That's where it feels like it's a good ending to the story. It's all the movies we love where the wayward son comes home. But Jesus doesn't end there. And what if that's the point? What if that's the idea of our story? So this morning we're going to look at this conversation about the heart of God through the lens of the older brother. We've got a lost son. We've got an older brother too, right? Even, and Jeremy mentioned like some of these stories would have been framed as the lost son or the story of the prodigal son, but early manuscripts actually call this the story of the prodigal, the story of two sons. Because Jesus is intentionally ending in a conversation between the father and his eldest. So let's jump in. We've got this tension. The party's happening. Imagine the party, and we jump in right here. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. Now, this is very important because where is he? Where he should be. He's doing exactly what he should be doing. He's working hard. He's checking the boxes. He is a good son. He's doing what he should. So he approaches the house. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and said, "Hey, what's going on?" "Your brother has come home," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." Now just put yourself in the shoes of the older brother for a second. You've been working hard. And you could have easily left too. You could have squandered everything too. You could have taken off, but you chose to do the right thing. And you're walking up to the house, and there's music, and there's laughter, and there's joy, and you're like, okay, there's a party going on. Wonder what this is about. And maybe you didn't expect the party to be for you, because, that would be weird, but you probably didn't expect it to be for that guy. You probably didn't expect a party to be for the one who had kind of tanked the family, squandered his inheritance, and messed up. So what does the older brother do? The older brother became angry and refused to go in. I picture he's out on this front porch and the party's happening inside behind him, and he's just standing there, arms crossed, tapping his foot, just thinking of all the stupid things the younger brother did and all the not so stupid things that he did. Let's keep going. So his father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders." Now note the choice of words here. What was doing the right thing, making my choice and doing the right thing, is now slaving away for you and not disobeying your orders. What was being a good son and choosing to work hard is now bondage and bitterness. But he continues. "Yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." Anybody else do this? So when I am super excited, especially now that they've moved out, I'm super excited to see my boys. Those are my boys. Those are my babies. But when I'm irritated, I'm like, "Sal, your son is calling. Sal, your son wants something. Look at what your son did. Look at how much your son spent." We do that, right? We detach ourselves when we're a little irritated. And that's what the brother's doing here. "That son of yours," not my brother, that son. And the father responds, "My son," immediately connecting him to him, right? "This is you and me, son. You are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." This brother, I know you're trying to detach yourself from your younger brother's story, but no, this is your brother. Several years ago, I arrived at the shocking self-diagnosis of older brother syndrome. I think I had actually been struggling with it probably my whole life, for sure, at least years. And what I realized in a specific moment, that this was actually a problem. It was a problem for my relationships. It was a problem for my mental health, but more importantly, it was a heart issue. Now, someone in my life was being what I thought was ridiculous. I worked with them, and I had come to observe that their behavior, they were manipulative. They cut corners. They had zero work ethic. They played the victim every single time. And some of that I feel like I could have kind of managed, but what absolutely drove me crazy, and even as I talk about it right now, I can feel the anger jumping up, and it's been a long time, is that everybody seemed okay with it. He was literally still given the keys to the kingdom basically in every space that we went into. It didn't matter how he behaved or how ridiculous his behavior was. People just kind of kept lavishing things on him, and it just kept working. And it was making me so angry. And I was ranting to someone about this. And I was ranting to a friend of mine who happens to be a pastor, which, just side note, if you want to rant, don't rant to a pastor. Not a good one, because they're going to be honest with you, and it's the worst. So I was telling him, I was so irritated because he knew this person. And I said, "Do you not see this? Just see how crazy this is? Am I crazy? Or he's like the prodigal. He just gets to do whatever he wants, and everybody's like, oh, let's have a party." It was the most infuriating feeling to be, and feel like I'm watching this scene. And he just kind of laughed, and he just said, "You know that story is actually just as much about the older brother as it is the younger, right?" And he goes, "And Jen, you know where the older brother is?" And I totally did, because I went to school for that stuff. And I said, "Yes, he's in the field doing what he should be doing." He goes, "No, he's on the porch. He's pouting. He's whining. And more importantly, Jen, he's missing the party." Do you really want to spend the rest of your life missing the party? I I had actually never paused to consider how many kind of figurative parties I had missed being mad at someone else's life choices. See, in my 20s, I was kind of more like the younger. That's when I came to faith. But very quickly, my natural tendency toward arrogance and judgment crept in. And what was kind of shocking to find myself in this moment when he said this to me was I had developed a deep lack of compassion and grace for people, and I had somehow justified that in my head. Now, I don't know where everybody kind of leans in this room. So some of you probably relate more to the older brother, some more to the younger. But I just thought because older brother syndrome can be super tricky to self-diagnose, I'm just going to diagnose all of you. So here's what we're going to do. I've got 2 lists, okay? And just see which one resonates most. Now, if, certain personalities are going to be like, well, I don't check all those boxes. Like, you're probably an older brother, done. If you don't really get wrapped up in these lists, but just kind of feel them more as tendencies and see where you kind of land. The first list goes like this. You're just naturally a rule follower. Rules make sense. Why would you not follow the rules? There are things to do and not to do. Don't do the things to not do, right? Like this makes sense for you. Because honestly, you kind of have this deep passion for fairness and justice. This is why those rules are important. Fairness and justice equal. It matters. You're probably a hard worker. Like no one accuses you of being lazy. You have a strong work ethic. You're probably you have this mentality of respect should be earned, right? And it should. And you will give respect when it's due, according to your standards, right? And you have this pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, right? And probably because you worked hard to get where you are. Maybe you were an younger brother and you really worked hard to change, to overcome that addiction, to overcome that mindset. And you are so glad you are where you are, but you just look at everybody and go, well, you could just get there too. I pulled my bootstraps up, you pull yours. But also maybe you also kind of tend to keep a record of wrongs. Like, you know what they did. It's been 20 years and you still know. Maybe at some point someone has mentioned to you, slightly nudged, that you might be a little arrogant, a little judgmental. Maybe you're prone toward jealousy and resentment. Now, you would never call it that because that sounds petty, but it's still there. And you communicate most of this with like passive-aggressive behavior, what you do and don't do for people, what you say and don't say, because sometimes you even neglect or ignore someone just to be a little spiteful. Because you're going to show younger brothers, you can come home, but I'm not going to talk to you. Does this sound like anyone you know? Do not look directly at people. I'm telling you, in first service, I think 4 or 5 times in first service, I was like, stop pointing. Like couples were pointing at each other. I was like, this is not good for your marriage. But maybe there's another. If that doesn't resonate with you, maybe you're more like this. You are the life of the party. Everybody loves to hang out with you because you are so easygoing. You befriend everyone. Because honestly, you're just naturally forgiving and generous. You don't keep a record of wrongs because you believe ultimately everything's probably going to work out okay in the end. Like, not many things are actually a big deal. You're frustrated by rules, and you're especially frustrated by others' expectations, because who are they to put that on you? And you can feel it suffocate you and bind you. Because you do believe that you should leave the past in the past. You don't hold your past against you, and you also don't hold others' past against them. This is some beautiful stuff here. But maybe also, you might be a little flighty and unreliable at times. We don't know if you're actually going to show up or not. You tend to avoid difficult or uncomfortable tasks. You prefer to focus on what comes easily or makes you feel good and happy because the tough stuff is just kind of annoying. You rarely consider the consequences of your actions. You don't spend a lot of time thinking of what might happen down the road or maybe how it impacts others because you live in the moment. And at some point, maybe someone told you that you're a little selfish or a little self-centered. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to put all the younger brothers over here, and we're going to put all the older brothers over. Good, because if you guys actually got up, I would have been super impressed, No, because here's the deal. Like, a brother of any birth order is not an indictment, but it's also not a badge of honor, and it's about seeing ourselves clearly. Because if we don't see ourselves clearly, we might have something going on in our heart that God would like to get a hold of, and we might miss the heart of God. Now, think about that situation. Like I shared with you the coworker that I was dealing with, that I felt insane how unfair things felt, and it felt like he got away with everything. But it might not be a coworker for you. Maybe it's an ex-spouse. They never really owned the role they played in what happened. And now you're watching them, and in some ways, it's like they still don't own it, and maybe even they seem happy, and that is painful. Or maybe it's an adult parent. Now, I say adult parent because when I hear parent, because I am a parent, I just think I'm talking about myself. No, I mean you're adult parent. Because I think we're not alone. We have tension with our parents, even as parents and as adults, right? Maybe that's the person that can not seem to own all the things they put you through, but they can absolutely point out all of your mistakes and how you're not parenting well. Maybe it's that past friend that never truly apologized for what they did to you. They never owned how they betrayed you. They never admitted that lie. Whoever it is, it's going to be different for all of us, but it's that person, right? It's that thing that jumps up in us. And I just want you to know, I mean, the reality is on that thing, it feels like it's not fair, and you're not wrong. It probably wasn't fair. And maybe it feels like it wasn't right. That was not okay. And I'm going to bet, I don't know everybody's situation, but for the majority of us, it wasn't okay. It wasn't right. You're not wrong. But what if that's not the point? And what if what Jesus is offering us here is an opportunity to see what the actual point is? Now, we arrive at older brother syndrome for all different sorts of reasons. For some of us, it's out of fear. We worry so much about everything that if we can't keep everything in order, we're worried we're not going to be safe, we're not going to be secure, something bad is going to happen. For others of us, it's about control. We like all the boxes checked. We like things in order, and we don't understand why the rest of you people don't, right? For some of us, it's pride, and I know that like this feels weird, but it's just true. The reality is there are people in the world that just think they are better than other people. And this is very much an older brother. They just think they make better choices and they are a better person. And they sometimes feel like people need to be aware of that. For some of you, it's just about justice. There's like this deep thing in you that just feels like that's not fair, that's not right. It needs to be equal. It needs to be just. Some of us, it's out of obligation. Meaning like we had this moment, we had this thing that we are so thankful that we had this life change. And so we feel very indebted to God or even indebted to the life change itself. But we look at others and we wonder why they can't quite get their stuff together like we were able to. Others, it's achievement. I've earned this. I've made this change. I've conquered this. I've done this. So you can, you can, you can, you can. And then others, it's just about perfection. There is a right way and a wrong way to do things. I'm not saying that as an example. I'm letting you know. There is a right way and a wrong way to do things because this is the kind of older brother that I am. And honestly, the thing is, and just a little grace for ourselves, some of us are just wired to be this way. I am actually naturally made in a way that the glass is half empty. I totally think we can fill it if you will listen to me and do what I tell you. But it is always going to be half empty for me. Now, in my day-to-day job here in Austin, I work with a couple of dreamers. They're kind of neat, and I love it. And we go in meetings, and here's my nickname in a meeting. So they're dreamers, and I'm known as the dream killer. And, at first I thought they were trying to be rude, but then I realized, well, they were. But then I have adapted it, and I recognize it's actually, true. So now what they do is they bring me into meetings to annihilate things. I come in, they're like, hey, we brought Jen. She's going to poke holes in this and tell us how it stinks. I'm like, I'm ready. Because nothing is ever good enough in my world. It's never going to be good enough. It can always be better. There will always be something wrong. And I'm almost made to only see what is wrong. Which is great, actually, in some work settings. It doesn't really work well in certain aspects of my life, small things like my marriage and parenting and some friendships or how I view myself. It gets a little tricky in that. But, last week we talked about how the younger brother had this come to his senses moment, right? He wants to eat the food that's being fed to the pigs, and he has this moment, let's read it again, when he came to his senses. How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving. I'm just going to go home. Well, older brothers can have come to your senses moments too. That was kind of what this conversation with my friend was. For me, it was a moment when I was like, oh, I'm missing the party. See, for older brothers, we have our come to our senses moment when we realize that both brothers are lost. Both brothers are gone. And they have lost the heart of the Father. And he wants them to come home. But it's so easy to get lost like that, right? To get wrapped up in that stuff. I can remember one time there was someone really, really close to my heart that I loved very, very much, and I was kind of frustrated or saddened for them. I think it was a mix of anger, but also sadness for the path that their life was going down. And so I did what I think we should all do, like when we're really frustrated with someone, I went to prayer. And so I just sat down, I started writing a prayer for this person. I said, "Dear God, free her from," and I just started to make a list of all the things I wanted her to change. And I just felt like God kind of dropped this thought on my heart. He's pretty clear and direct with me. He has to be. It's really tough. He says, "Rip it up." He goes, "You don't get to dictate what freedom looks like for her. Pray for freedom. Yeah. Hope for good things for her. Invite me into her life. Pray over her, but I get to do the work, not you." You know, Jeremy made a great statement last week that I love. He said that oftentimes as younger brothers, we have this tendency to take our perception of ourselves, right? Like we feel not worthy, not good enough, too far gone, irretrievably lost. And we put that on God. God sees me as too far gone. God sees me as not good enough. God is embarrassed by me. God is ashamed of me. But older brothers, here's what we tend to do. We take our perception of God, His holiness, His authority, His righteousness, and we put it on us. We become the judge and the jury. And I know that sounds like harsh, and I don't think we mean to do it, but we end up like taking this moral high ground and projecting God onto us and forgetting that God's got His own journey with younger and older brothers. Now, when I was in this season of like a wake-up call for me, when I came to my senses, I decided to do this thing. It was kind of therapeutic for me. I began to write a series of letters. And I just kind of was writing them between a figurative older and younger brother, just imagining what a conversation would sound like. And just being honest about how I felt and how irritated I could be with younger brothers, and letting the younger brother try and be like honest back to me about how judgy that felt. And at the end, I wrote what I consider like an apology to younger brothers. Because the reality is I had like a mental Rolodex of all the people I had older brothered to death. I had pushed people away because they didn't line up with what I had deemed right living, right? And so I just want to read to you what I wrote forever ago, right? Because you know, if you are an older brother, just that person that's kind of stuck in your head today, or maybe a series of people, I just wonder what it would look like for you to apologize to them or to consider it. But even more importantly than that, to be honest, if you're a younger brother who maybe it was even like scary for you to come in these doors because you're terrified of older brothers, and you should be, we're scary. And you weren't even sure you could even step into a relationship with a Christian because you've only felt judged and critiqued. Could you just sit for a minute and let me offer this as an apology from one younger brother to all of you? I just want to read what I wrote. An apology to younger brothers. I'm sorry. Please know that I war within myself, and it's a mix of pride, arrogance, judgment, but also hope and frustrated belief in your potential. Perhaps I have too narrow a definition of how someone should live their life, or in some ways I'm just simply jealous of the life you get to live. There's part of me that knows that you're not hoping to hurt yourself. I don't think most people wake up trying to heap on more guilt and shame and lies in their life. And just as much as you desire change in your life, I desire freedom from feeling like a Pharisee in my own walk. I recognize that many younger brothers lack awareness, some by choice, others by circumstance, but regardless, the estate belongs to the Father. It's not my place to judge you. I'm responsible for me, you are responsible for you, and I apologize for often acting as if your choices were somehow attached to me. I also want to apologize for seeing you as the sum of your choices. You may make mistakes, but that doesn't mean you are a mistake. You may not act loving toward yourself or others, but that doesn't make you less worthy of love. You are more than your past, have value in your present, and you are not destined to a doomed future. And I am sorry for all the ways that I contributed to you doubting that you are loved and change is absolutely possible. I will fight to show grace. I will assume a hopeful stance toward you. If mercy is new every morning for me, it's equally new for you. I want to be a support rather than a stumbling block. And while that doesn't mean condoning decisions that rob you or others of life, it does mean not heaping on extra portions of guilt and animosity. I'm sorry when I struggle to be honest. I'm sorry when I'm passive aggressive. I'm sorry I have not made you feel loved. At times, my sense of fairness and right overruled the command to love well because I'm still learning how to love well. I can't always guarantee a harnessed version of my personality, but I can't apologize for alienating you in all those small and not so small ways. I will work to be a better older brother, one day hoping to simply reflect the heart of the Father. Love an older brother. To reflect the heart of the Father. That's the point of this story. That's actually the point of all of these stories. I would maybe even argue the point of everything that Jesus teaches, right? That's why Jeremy said last week that this actually could have been called the parable of the prodigal God. Jesus is telling this story and using a father to illustrate how God feels about the whole audience. But they've been lost. And I know sometimes that it's hard when you're an older brother. You feel like, yeah, but what if they don't understand what they did, or what if that thing really wasn't fair, Jen? Like it really wasn't right, and it really wasn't okay. And I can remember I had a moment in which there was a person that had told a lie about me to several other people. And it was kind of like a big deal lie. And they were asked to apologize to me, and they apologized. I mean, I didn't really feel like it was a full apology, but I'm never going to feel like it's a full apology because I'm an older brother. And I was ranting to God about it. I was working at a church, and we were moving tables, which for some reason we do way too often. We move tables all the time when you work at a church. And I was like holding this table, and I remember just inside, I'm telling God, this is ridiculous. She got away with this. She gets to say what she wants, and she gives kind of an apology, and we're okay. This is insane. This is not okay. And again, I felt like God just dropped something on my heart. He just said, oh, you think I think this is okay? I never said it was okay, but I'm also working in her life. And it just made me think about how many times maybe, just like the older brother kind of like rips into the father, like how many times I'd created distance between me and God, or distance between my heart and the heart of God because of what seemed unfair and not right. Thinking that God somehow declared that okay. And I wonder for anybody in the room, like, have you decided to put that distance there? And you're frustrated with God or frustrated with the church because you feel like there are things that should be okay and right and true, and they're just not handling it the way that you want them to, but that doesn't mean they're declaring things okay. God wasn't saying that what happened to me was okay, but he was at work in her life. And that was hard for me to hear because I struggled with her. I love the response that the father gives the younger son. It says he saw him from a long way off, and he was filled with compassion. That person that you've been thinking about this morning, if you saw them from a long way off, you saw her from a long way off, you saw him from a long way off, what would you be filled with? What jumps up in you? Because if it's anything other than love and compassion, it's possible we're missing the heart of God. It will totally make sense not to be, by the way. I mean, those feelings make sense, but like if we're not submitting them to God, just like my personal tendencies make total sense, but I have to submit them to God to connect to the heart of the Father. So what can we learn from the heart of the Father? Just 3 things real quick. 1, he has genuine concern for both sons. Again, like what we just talked about. He has compassion, love, grace, hope for both sons. He wants one to come up the driveway quickly, and he wants the other to come in off the porch. 2, both sons get an invitation. Both sons are welcomed home. The gate at the driveway is not locked where the younger brother has to figure out how to get in. And the older son's simply on the porch, and you can just turn around at any moment and come inside and not miss the party. And I think this is Jesus' favorite point in this whole moment. He's pointing to especially those that were the most found, right? Like the Pharisees and Sadducees that might have been listening, the religious leaders of the time that checked every box, that did all the right things and are still wondering where their reward might be. And he says, the ground is level. And for us, the ground is level at the cross. He's trying to let us know, hey, I'm coming for both of you. The older brothers that do it well and do it right, and I'm so thankful, and everything I have is yours. And the younger brothers that are so lost and have squandered it all and are just trying to figure out how to get home. Both sons get an invitation. 3rd, he lets them come at their own pace. And I love this particularly. 1, he doesn't send an army out to get the younger son, right? He could have done that. He could have deployed some convoy and be like, go get him from that town and drag him back here. He doesn't do that. He doesn't make him come home. Right, which reminds us, younger brothers and older, you get to choose. You get to choose the moment you accept the invitation, the moment you start walking up the driveway, or the moment you come in off the porch. You know, when I think of that driveway, I picture this like epic, Gone with the Wind, long driveway. And while the brother gets to choose, the father doesn't go out into town and drag him home, because he knows if I drag you home, you'll probably turn right back around. But he also doesn't allow him this long walk of shame. And if I'm honest, I think sometimes older brothers, that's how we want people to approach us. Head down, rehearsing speeches on how they wronged us and what they did. But I'll be honest, that's not the heart of the Father. He doesn't just walk to him. He runs to meet him. It says here in Luke, but when he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion and ran to his son and threw his arms around him. He meets him where he is. But similarly, as the older brother is on the front porch, tapping his foot, pouting, and if he's anything like me, he's been out there for quite a while. He is also preparing a speech, just like the younger, but it probably sounds a little more like, you know what? I'm going to start working in the field too. Maybe then Dad'll throw me a party with a fattened calf, which is what we all want, right? Parties with fattened calves. But here's what the father does, just like he does. He sees his son from a long way off. The father notices that someone is missing from the party, and he goes outside and pleads with him to come in. Because both sons get an invitation. Both brothers get asked to come home. The invitation for the younger brother, the word Jeremy chose last week that I love, it feels more like grace. And while the older brother gets grace too, but if I'm honest, I feel like it feels more like a release of judgment and bitterness. So I think the older brother gets an invitation to freedom. You don't have to try and be God in other people's lives anymore. Welcome to freedom. Now, my favorite part about both these brothers is that Jesus ends the story with, hey, please come inside. And the older brother rants. He says, everything I've had is yours. Your brother's home. We need to celebrate. And we never learn if the older brother comes inside or not. It stops there. We never know if the older brother comes inside or the younger brother just returns to his lifestyle. We never see it in this story. And I think that's part of the point, especially for older brothers, right? Like the coin is found, like we talked about 2 weeks ago. The sheep is retrieved and recovered. The lost son comes home, but we don't know what happens to the older brother. I think that's part of the point. We don't get part 2 of the story because God is still anxiously looking to write it in each of our lives. Now, I mentioned I'm an only child, but I actually am a mother of 2 sons. So in some ways, I've gotten to experience a little bit of this. Both my boys are super different. Anybody else have more than one kid? Okay. This doesn't feel like there would be more of you, but that's okay. Yeah, so anybody with more than, the Norcrosses, they don't count. That's like a whole other thing with lots and lots of kids. But anybody with 2 or 20 children, ever been accused of loving one more than the other? Okay, you guys stop nudging people, guys. Like you can't, that doesn't work. Right, you know that feeling, like as a parent, this is what I long for. They are both so different. Like I, as an only child, did not realize how different they would be. But if I could give them anything, it would be for them to see that my heart loves them equally. And so, like I mentioned years ago when I was writing those letters, I also wanted to stop for a minute and consider what it would look like to be the father. Because one thing I spent a lot of time doing between these 2 boys is trying to convince them that I love them equally and that they should love each other. Right? And so I just want to share this with you. I wrote this toward the end of writing, like my apology to younger brothers. I just spent a second asking myself what God might say, trying to get the younger and the older brother to see each other through his heart. My sons, this tension between you breaks my heart. You're both my sons, and I love you both so deeply. I have shared all that I have with both of you. I would gladly lay down my life for both of you. You are both very different. You have very different decisions that you have made, but you both carry your own unique burdens. You both struggle, and you both have so much to learn in life, and I don't want either one of you to miss a moment. It's not this son or that son for me. I'm able to love you both equally with my whole being. Yet see how different you are at the same time. It's not as if my heart is property you must divide, like the song we sang this morning. I don't give my heart in pieces. It's not an inheritance you have to figure out how to share. That is how things work with materials. But my love and desire for you is not a possession to be fought for. You can't earn my love, but you also can't squander my heart. How I hold and cherish my relationship with you is wholly outside yourselves. It stands apart from you and it knows no end. When you are lost, whether it's because you're trying to figure out if you want to walk up the driveway or you're on the porch and you're mad, when you are lost, it's simply because you have forgotten that I love you. You forgot who made you, who stands waiting for you to come home. Whether you find yourself sleeping with the pigs or angry on the porch, I'm still here. All I have is yours. Love your Father. And do you know where you are? Like, do you know if you've just started this journey to walk up the driveway? Do you know if you're still on the porch? Maybe you totally experienced that driveway moment, but you now find yourself holding a lot of bitterness and judgment, animosity toward others. And what would it look like for each of us to just say, what would an invitation from God sound like in my life right now? We've been doing this series, A Heart to Heart. What is God saying to your heart? Just you and him. What letter would he write to you? What would he invite you to be free from? Or what would he invite you to receive grace in? What would that look like? I do think that's really the goal. We all get an invitation. And what if each of us was at the party and we didn't miss any more parties because we decided to pursue having the heart of the Father? I'm going to pray for us. Father, I thank you that while we were a long way off, you came to meet us. Father, I thank you that while we are standing on the porch and frustrated even with other people's choices or even choices of our own, you come to meet us. And you offer us an opportunity to be more like you, to have your heart. God, help us to accept that invitation every single day, that tomorrow when we wake up, we decide that we're just going to be thankful that all you have is ours and that you are with us and that you meet us. Help us to love ourselves well, to recognize that we are not irretrievably lost, but equally help us to love others better so that no one misses an invitation to the party. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you guys so much. We'll start a new series next week.